I've been seeing like secondaries for OpenAI, and literally there's like no information about how the company's doing or whatever. And they're like 50K minimum, make a decision in 5 minutes. And I'm
Like, yo, like,
while everyone is really focused on like the next longevity pill or AI in healthcare, how do we modernize ancient healing modalities and forgotten wellness with tech, data, and science? I think people get FOMO very often in venture, and that's when you get super stupid, overvalued companies that aren't good for the investors and it's not good for the founders.
welcome back to VC Unfiltered. We're so incredibly excited to have you here. Today on the show, Helene from JourneyOne Ventures joins us to talk about the cutting edge of the health and wellness space and the different investments that she's diving into. So excited to have her here. Helene, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lucas. It was great to meet at a wellness VC retreat. Instead of a crazy room, we were in beautiful Ojai, California.
Honestly, I couldn't have been happier. I think that day for a lot of us was just kind of needed of getting away from the chaos and everything else. I know that a couple of us had some very intense phone calls literally right before we went in. And so being able to breathe with everyone was quite a treat.
Yeah, I think a lot of funds happen to have their AGMs, which is like their annual LP meetings, with founders and portfolio companies. It was a great mix up for us to decompress a little bit and slow down. And I think that's one thing I want to talk about in terms of the culture I'm building at JourneyOne.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, honestly, let's dive into it. So I want to find out more about the fund, what you guys are investing in, and kind of do a deep dive into such a unique and interesting sector.
JourneyOne Ventures, I launched it in 2021, and we made 10 bets and have 9 existing portfolio companies at the moment. And my focus is really investing in frontier health and wellness with a focus on software, biotech, consumer tech, and digital health. And so we cover a lot of the core venture backable categories within health and wellness. And one of the questions and personal missions that I always ask myself is, how do we modernize ancient healing modalities and forgotten wellness with tech, data, and science? While everyone is really focused on like the next longevity pill or AI in healthcare, I think those are really interesting sectors and trends to follow. But there's a lot of incredible resources that I think from a cultural and social construct, we probably have overlooked. So, for example, we recently invested in a male birth control company called Contraception, and they have 2 out of the 3 global assets in the male contraception industry. And as a man who's looking to look for male contraceptives, there's only 2 options in the market, which is getting a vasectomy, which is hard to reverse and very expensive to reverse, and then condoms. And so they have a male IUD version, which is technically a medical device. These are all FDA regulated products and processes. And then they have a hormonal, gel that the patient would put on their arm daily. That is a different approach. And so when I look at the category contraception, it's not like we just invented birth control. We started innovating and developing products mainly for women. And I think the cultural construct at the time was women should have the responsibility of this challenge. And so now, things have changed. And we also have some, advances in material sciences to get us there. But, we maybe have been able to do this before. It's just the social construct at this time didn't give us that opportunity.
I mean, that would be game changing in general. So what a unique space to be in. So that's absolutely one aspect, right, of the kind of frontier health and wellness. What else are you looking at, or what kind of comes across your plate in general? Because it seems like a very unique category.
So another company that we backed in the last 2 years is Lykos Therapeutics. So they are a drug pharmaceutical company that develops MDMA for MDMA-assisted therapy. So it's actually combining drug plus talk therapy for the use case of PTSD treatment. And when we started doing diligence on the sector of, okay, this is one approach to help solve for, deep acute depression. And then there's anxiety, eating disorders, what are some of the trends that are evolving from this company trying to attack this use case, and are there other approaches? So we looked at a company that helps patients get off antidepressants, and they have basically a digital health platform that they're building, and it's pretty in beta. And so, once we look at one deal that we go in on, it takes a lot of work to look at a completely different sector. So you kind of catch on a theme, you learn a lot, and then you build a thesis. And we started to build a thesis within like the sexual wellness space that we're exploring. So we're looking at doing an investment in, the STI testing sector, which, it's a massive TAM for those that are sexually active, and also one of the hindrances to getting pregnant has been STIs like gonorrhea and chlamydia that are easily preventable that sometimes people don't know they have. And so, we look at use cases that solve problems that we really care about. I've dealt with a ton of anxiety, and I didn't go the route of antidepressants. I went into coaching and lots of therapy and just changing habits that would catalyze anxiety and manifest anxiety. But there are a lot of people who, struggle with that, but don't have those same tools and resources to take the approach I did. And so it's one that I like really relate to. And I think when we were diligencing this tapering platform for antidepressants, it was one of those deals when you watch customer interviews or interviews on people who are dealing with this problem. And, this woman had this video and she was talking about getting brain zaps and just feeling like I tried to get off my medication. My doctor didn't have a good solution for me, and I just feel trapped. And she was just like crying and depressed about it. And it just like really hit home for me. I was like, this is a severe issue, and 1/3 of the U.S. population is on a daily psychoactive drug. So I don't see that number materially decreasing.
Well, hopefully with the investments that you're making, potentially,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, one step at a time, hopefully makes that change.
100%. And from the storytelling aspect, I mean, it's to be able to invest into such a interesting space that can actually change lives, like tangibly, that you can see. I mean, it's a great mission to be able to be on, especially for you and for your LP. So congrats on that, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'm curious to learn a little bit more about like what sectors or industries you're really focused on in the next 6 months. But it's always an ever evolving creative process. And the more fun I can have in, trying to figure out what is the next thing that's going to create a lot of energy for me to want to go really deep in the subject. I think that's like the beauty of this job. And also running a fund is that you have a lot of flexibility to really make it fun and meet a ton of people and solve problems that you genuinely care about.
Honestly, I think venture is probably best for people with like kind of intense ADD where
right here. Don't tell the podcasters about my interesting management habits.
Oh God. No, I mean, it's the perfect thing is because it lends itself so well to anyone that has it, because you dive so deep into a subject so intensely, and you're like, okay, that was super interesting. It's like, oh, now there's a new emerging industry. Let me dive deep into something like that. It catches your eye, and you will do it deep dive into there for 6 or 12 months and learn everything that there's absolutely to know about the space, and then you can move on to a different one. And so yeah.
I think one of the things that I've learned about this job after being, 6 years in it now and kind of 5 years really like hyper focused and then running the fund for the last couple of years, it's really hard to be proactive about your daily schedule. Like a lot of this job is really reactive. For example, you don't know when one of your portfolio companies is going to, need to run a Hail Mary with some sort of decision that you need to drop everything for and pick it up. And so just understanding the workflow and how you design, doing diligence and creating community
Awesome. So walk me through. So you've walked a little bit around kind of your strategy. Is there a stage that you're investing in? Is it pre-seed seed? Walk me through a little bit more about that. And then I'm just even from my own kind of personal understanding, because we don't do a ton of consumer deals. Like I would love to find out more about how you're approaching even diligence, or when you look at the deals on kind of what your methodology is around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think consumer is a really big category, right? I think we're starting to look at consumer tech, and um, one of the companies in the sexual wellness space is a digital health platform. Um, and then there's also consumer packaged goods, which is, food and beverages and beauty. And I always like to look at like what is venture backable. I think the interesting thing about being VC is that you want to be pointed in how you're hunting, but open to all opportunities because you're basically building this like data set in your brain, right? And the more information that you can feed it, the better you can start to refine a thesis or see opportunities. Um, and so, I think certain categories are sometimes challenging. Like for example, CPG. Um, Sometimes it's hard to get patents within products. Maybe it's the product itself or the service of how the product is delivered. Um, that differentiates the company. But I think one of the questions that I saw in preparing for the podcast is like, what's the hot take of unpopular opinion about like startup or venture ecosystem? And I think it's when venture capital started as a model to catalyze exponential growth for software companies. And then, in the, what was it, like 2000, maybe like 9 to 14 era, we had a lot of consumer companies that were consumer packaged goods getting financially built by this same structure. And, if you pump a lot of money in a company to spend on marketing, you can definitely get top line revenue and generate venture scale returns. But when it comes to profitability and having like a reasonable CAC, that can, often go to.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, if I want to see some of these businesses exist, so they're not quite venture scale, um, how can you get these businesses off the ground? And so I think revenue-based financing is really interesting for companies that can be cash flowing in the first like 6 to 12 months. It really just like depends on also the business model. Like consumer packaged goods, sometimes service-based businesses can get that way. And I think, for founders, equity is very expensive to raise early on. And also valuations are always just kind of sometimes made up.
Yeah.
Like a pre-seed company used to be 3.5 million, now it's $5 million in valuation. And then everybody who raises out of YC is out the gate 10 to 30 million, like pre-revenue. So it's like you're raising, you're giving up sometimes a lot of your company early on, and the valuation doesn't even make sense. Like, there has to be different ways to get a business off the ground that could potentially have venture returns, but maybe it's at like a series A stage that they raise certain like venture financing. So these are just some things that I've noticed that I'm trying to better understand, and it just has taken one deal by deal to get to that thought.
Honestly, and I totally understand that, because when you look at some of the companies that come out, and if they're valued pre-revenue at 10 to 30, it's like, okay, how am I supposed to return like the valuation that I'm coming in at? Like it would be very
So
difficult
high.
to, yeah, it'd be very difficult to get a 50 or 100x out of it. I don't know how I make the fund returns that I need based on the valuation that they're going for. I mean, it's weird now, even right now, seed deals are almost at the same level as A deals were like 8 years ago, like which is insane to me. Like pre-seed wasn't even really a thing like 10 or 15 years ago, and so the ecosystem can get absolutely a little wonky. I mean, the reset definitely has helped, I would say, from that kind of view, but yeah, it's still, you have to be very opportunistic in kind of what you're looking at to be able to deliver the right returns back to the LPs.
Yeah, so I think going back to your question regarding consumer, it's out of the three categories we like to spot for deals in, I would say we're more interested in consumer technology at the moment and looking at a lot of like digital health platforms that are essentially like point solutions, like specific types of care delivered through that. And still trying to formulate like what category, like, IVF and egg freezing and fertility has been a big category since the COVID era.
Yeah.
And, the first women's focus healthcare funds only really launched in the last 5 years, which is bonkers. And so if you kind of look at that trend of like when people started really backing the category, I'm trying to work out a timeline of, okay, well, what are the sectors that people went really big in, and is it going to fuel innovation in tangential sectors around it? Um, and so how do we look at that? And your other question I forgot to answer was stages. And
Yeah.
it's a fun one because, like valuations versus stage, like it can mean very different things to different investors, especially in really expensive markets like New York and SF. But so we're generally C to Series B stage, and specifically right now, I really like bridge rounds that can provide like near term, like that are going to raise in like a 6 to 9 month to a preferred round. And from a fund manager perspective, it's a nice markup, right? Getting in before at a discount and then seeing how much that company what type of KPIs that company can hit within that 6 to 9 month timeline. So I think as we evolve, I look at like what's our existing portfolio, what can we round it out. Our last two deals were FDA approval deals. Like let's focus on revenue generating digital health deals,
Nice. Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and balance that out because biotech deals take a long time to get moving.
yes. Yeah. Clinical trials take a while. Like even within the portfolio, or maybe outside of it, tangentially, what do you have any war stories that you would want to share either from deals maybe that you did do that you didn't? Would love to hear more about the space.
When I first got started in 2018, I was working for a family office, and I formerly worked in enterprise tech for a voice AI company. And so when I pivoted to venture, I was like, okay, well, I'll do tech. Like that sounds kind of an easy transition. But I've also done like six career pivots. So my background wasn't just tech. I've worked in like hardware before. I worked in the electric bicycle industry. I worked for Puma and Reebok. So it was just like I could have potentially approached venture from a few different angles. But the most recent one was working in enterprise tech and specific telecom. And so this is when the cannabis industry in California was becoming adult use legal. And so there are a lot of interesting things coming from that sector. And I hyper specialized in cannabis. And one of the deals that I came across, but I never fully pursued, was a company called Dutchy, which is a point of sale solution specifically for dispensaries. And for the audience, cannabis is a vertical SaaS industry where, because it's federally illegal still, majority of the U.S. market is medically legal, and then it's adult use legal. So we have about, what is it, like 39 states at this point, and 25 plus states. And so companies like Shopify and Block, which was Square, publicly traded companies, they don't want to operate in the sector. So what it did is that it created very specific vertical SaaS solutions, point of sale to B2B wholesale, to service the industry. And this company, I was already looking at a deal and I got too excited about it and didn't kind of like closed my vision on going deeper into the horizontal that I was looking at, which was like retail tech. And they ended up raising, I think, a Series A in 2019 and around like 15 or 20. And then in 2021, they were valued at 3.7 billion. And 2021 was also a massive bull market,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The valuation wasn't predicated based on like a reasonable revenue multiple, but still,
Yeah. Yeah.
like holy shit, like.
Yeah.
And so I think you can't have FOMO because it's like you always could have been an email or intro away from a company.
Yeah.
Um, but that one, hurt. And I think as an investor, like if you don't look at this job as experimental, like you'll be a little too hard on yourself. The best way that I look at life in general and learning is that like, okay, I didn't get that right. What did I learn? And like how can I do better next time? And that one was like, you know, when you do get excited on a deal, get really real with like the bias that you might have and bring people around the table to help make decisions that really push and think differently than you. And that's why we talk a lot about diversity in venture, is that not just from different education, backgrounds, countries, but it it pushes you to really think through different perspectives. Because I think as humans, we're pattern making machines.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of investors tend to follow sheep mentality. And so, I've been seeing like secondaries for OpenAI, and literally there's like no information about how the company's doing or whatever. And they're like 50K minimum, make a decision in 5 minutes. And I'm like,
Like, yo, like,
it's a brand name. I get it. We know it's going to do well. I get that. But like, I think people get FOMO and follow hype very often in venture. And that's when you get super stupid, overvalued companies that aren't good for the investors and it's not good for the founders.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's one of my things that like kind of just sucks about the human condition in venture.
yeah. I mean, it's true. We're supposed to look for outliers, but a lot of the time, everyone ends up following the same path. And I mean, I can look at Bird. This was so apparent to me with Bird in 2017. I was like, I don't get how this makes sense. Like half the country is frozen for half the year. Like they're not going to use scooters. You can't use it when it rains because you're gonna eat crap. And so yeah, that one was but within a year, it's $1 billion company, and I'm like, I don't get how this makes sense. Like,
I actually get the use case because, again, I worked in the electric bike and urban mobility space. I think the scale at which they got off the ground was just unrealistic. Like I remember I recently just moved back to LA, and I remember when I was living in LA when bird was like super hot in 2019. I would walk the Venice canals and see a bird in the canal, and I was like, "This is a problem.
yeah,
Like this is what ruthless scale looks like, and it's not cool. It's like literally watching people throw money away, but also like damage the environment and potentially the little cute things living in that gross water."
wait, yeah, the Venice canals might be a stretch, but yeah,
You never know what might be living in the murky water or the Venice canals. We want to be considerate of our monster friends.
so well, then walk me through the use case a little bit more because I can see it at scale, but I like even with then, like I understood it if you were looking at it from if we could take it from the like in Amsterdam, right? Like mostly bikes, right? High city, very little cars. I don't know how well it like in LA necessarily it might have ended up running through, but I would love to hear your kind of perspective.
I think it's also like was designed for cars, and majority of the land in a city is occupied by a car that moves 5 to 10% of the time. And so most like people like the convenience of getting A to B, you know, in a comfortable way. And the West Side, particular in LA, is really flat. It's easy for people to move around. So I don't think it's like every city, every market can benefit from like electric scooters or electric bikes, but a lot can. And the cost of a car versus a bicycle, it's also just culture, right? Like when I got into electric bikes in 2011, no one knew what the hell an electric bike was, and bike share didn't exist in the United States. Bike share hit the ground in Boston and New York, I think in like 2014. And so the conditions to ride were scary for people. Like if you go on a bike in LA, likelihood of you getting an accident is like way too high. So like,
Yeah.
and so that's why I think you have to look at like, changing consumer behavior and when a product comes and like what are those markets that it makes most sense to launch in. But, when some companies raise several $100 million and it's like we're just going to go in every market, and I think that's, a ruthless mentality that sometimes isn't fully thought through.
100%. Honestly, Helene, thank you so much for coming on the show. Truly appreciate it. We're just about out of time, but any final thoughts that you would love to leave our viewers with?
I think for investors that are listening to the podcast, one of the things that I really wish I did from day one was have a super organized and tight CRM software that I chose from day one. I actually built my contact book and deal book in Airtable, and it just didn't scale. I think Airtable is like Salesforce for like like entry level folks, but there's more programming and more sexiness to Airtable. But what I mean by that, it takes a lot more stitching and developing to actually have the product that you want. But it's nice because it can be super modular. So we actually did a like 90 to 6 month process to really upgrade our back-end operations. And it allowed us to do deals faster, to market to our LPs opportunities on the SPV and the syndicate that we run more efficiently with automation and workflow. And we chose HubSpot sales and marketing because instead of doing like type form questionnaires and putting it into like a Monday CRM, it just all lives in one spot.
Yeah.
So I think for those that are really looking to make decisions to help create more efficiency in their process, really looking at their systems earlier rather than later, I highly recommend.
Yeah, I will 100% jump on that bandwagon because we use HubSpot too. So I'm 100% on board with you. Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate it. Look forward to chatting with you again.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. I'll have to stop by the office.